but then we're also going to give it a lot more horsepower and reliability.
Woo! That's what we do.
Okay, welcome back to the DIY Hemi channel on YouTube. And what we're going to do is a continuation of a previous video that you may have seen where we've taken the 6.1 out of a 2006 Charger SRT8 and we were removing it for a specific project. So today we are going to show you what that project is all about. So what we have here is a beautiful 1972 FM3 painted Plymouth Barracuda. It currently sports a full Hotchkiss suspension and a 340 cubic inch small block Mopar V8. It's got a nice healthy camshaft in it. It really does run pretty good considering, you know, older technology. It just has some drivability issues. It doesn't really have the power. It sounds amazing. It doesn't have the power of the new technology and late model Hemi swaps. So we're going to give this sucker a facelift. We're going to go ahead and put the new powertrain in this beautiful car. And if you have watched our previous video, you may have been wondering about why doing this. Why did we take apart that car? We did cover it at one point in time. But let's go ahead and recap it again. So the 2006 SRT8 was beautiful, ran great, and the economics worked out with the current market prices of those, that it was just easier to remove the 6.1 out of a vehicle that our customer already had, as opposed to going out and sourcing a 6.1 or a 6.4. By the time he sold the body on that car, he actually wound up with a net of about $3,000 in for a 6.1 Hemi with 90,000 miles. That's a great deal. So again, watch that video, highly recommend it. We go into a little bit more specifics, details on that car and why we pulled the engine. I just wanted to touch on that for a minute. So I'll step out of the frame here. We can get a good shot of this. If anyone's wondering, the stripe on this car is pretty unique. That was a 1970 option, this strobe stripe. Not many people are aware of that strobe stripe. This one is painted on, so it's not a decal, and it has iridescent mixed in it. It pops really well, but a lot of people ask us about this stripe. So if you do your homework, for 1970 only, they offered a strobe stripe that was not the same strobe stripe as the AAR. You can see it's a little bit higher up on the body line, but it's a unique piece, and I think a lot of our viewers will get a kick out of this. Okay, let's go ahead.
Let's see what she's got.
There we go. It's pretty.
Voila.
So it's currently also sporting a vintage air system, AC system. We are going to retain the vintage air. What we're going to do is remove some of the lines and reroute them to the lower mounted third generation Hemi AC compressor down on the driver's side. But this hard line here, the external side, the heater hoses, a lot of this stuff will be here. We're not going to really mess with a whole lot inside the car. We're just going to switch out the powertrain as far as the engine's concerned, reuse the transmission. We're going to reuse the 727 TorqueFlite automatic, and as much possible, as much we can possibly save, we're going to save to this car. It's going to be hopefully a pretty direct swap.
Nice. So the transmission actually bolts right up?
Yes. So as some of our viewers may or may not know, the old school small block transmissions, it could be, say, the old 4-speeds, 833s, the automatic 904, the automatic 727, the TorqueFlite. Those have the same bell housing bolt pattern as the late model Hemis. So they pretty much bolt right up. There are some things you have to do. With the automatics, you're going to use a flex plate adapter, so it's a different flex plate that enables the correct spacing between the rear of the crankshaft and the torque converter on the 727. And then if you were to, say, do an manual transmission, a 4-speed, you would have to cut about 5/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch off the tip of the input shaft because of the difference in length of the register on the new Hemi. Other than that, it all bolts together. for all intents and purposes here with this project, we're going to use the adapter plate and just bolt it to the existing 727 transmission, keeping it simple. Our linkages are going to stay the same inside the car. He actually has a really cool automatic shifter that looks like the pistol grip inside, so all of that's going to stay consistent. As far as the car is concerned, externally and internally, it's going to look identical when it leaves here. It's just going to run better, have more power, better fuel mileage, and a little bit more reliability. So that's the whole movement behind the Hemi swap, is to get those key benefits and have a really nice street cruiser.
So Blake, tell us, as far as the bodies go, how is this going to help people with maybe other bodies? What is this going to be applicable to?
Okay, that's a great question. So many of the modifications that we're going to be doing to the third generation Hemi to bolt it into this engine compartment is going to be consistent with a lot of your classic Mopars. So your A, B, and E bodies. A is a little bit different in that it's a tighter engine compartment. So you're going to need A-body specific third generation Hemi engine mounts plates. And then you're going to have to go away from factory power steering in an A-body. There's simply not enough room. So your options are to use a manual steering box or maybe like a Borgeson power steering unit, which is available from the aftermarket. Factory will not work on an A-body, but it's going to use the same torque converter flex plate adapter. It's going to use the exact same center sump oil pan, so the conversion oil pan, and it's going to use the same electrical harness and same radiator hoses, same fans. All that's going to be consistent A, B, and E body. The difference being, again, the mounting and the power steering is going to be a little different. So that's really it as far as that's concerned. When you're going to watch these series of videos, this will give you a great insight to A, B, and E body Hemi swaps. So you're going to get a lot more information than just, oh, that'll only work on a Challenger or Barracuda E body. It's going to work on all of those.
Nice. Man, that interior looks sweet.
It is fresh. I love that white interior.
Let's go check it out, guys.
Check it out. Get a load of that shifter. It's got a beautiful dashboard. The dashboard, I'm not sure if that's aftermarket or what, but it's in great shape.
God, look at that, guys. That is a nice white, super clean. The dashboard, I see it. A little bit hard to see.
Has the tough style steering wheel. That was a big trend back in the day. Radial TAs. It's a beautiful car sitting on some chrome rally wheels. So chrome plated rally wheels, aftermarket. Really good stuff. It has that old school Mopar vibe, you know?
Yep.
This thing it's going to turn heads. I mean, it does already, but it's really going to turn heads with that 6.1 under the hood.
Yeah, I'm digging the pink too. The pink is...
It's cool.
It is cool. I thought it'd be like really like girly, but it's like really badass.
FM3 Moulin Rouge, I think, is the Plymouth name for it. Panther Pink is the Dodge variant of it. Same color, but they always had cool names for their paint.
Mopar, man, Mopar. They had fun.
And that's what it's about, having fun, right?
That's it.
I can't wait, man. This is going to be a really cool car.
Yep.
So stay tuned, follow along. We're going to cover everything from converting the engine, which we have sitting here on the ground next to it. We're going to convert it with a center sump oil pan. We're going to cover air conditioning compressors. We're going to cover exhaust. We're going to cover the flex plate adapter on the back. We're also going to cover what you need to do when you do the oil pan swap. So we're going to get into the details of making sure you have the proper bolts on your main caps for the offset stud for the pickup tube, how to torque things down the spec and really do your due diligence when changing the oil pans for these Hemi swaps. So we're really going to get into some details here. The last thing we're going to do here is wrap up with the fuel system. So we'll cover how we're going to modify the fuel system for fuel injection, cranking out 60 pounds of fuel pressure. And we're going to do the air condition swap in this car. So showing how the vintage air system will work with the late model compressor and the location. How we're going to bolt it all up, how we're going to make it work is all going to be covered in this series of videos.
Can't wait. Bringing it to you guys. Stay tuned.
That's it. Alright, so what we're going to do is give it one last little spin before we go ahead and dive into it. We decided last minute we wanted to do this to kind of show you the before and after of the mannerisms of old school versus new school. So, great car. It sounds great. No issues there, but let's just go ahead and get it cranked up. So you can see it's got a lot of vibration, a lot of shake, you know. It sounds very muscular, very cool, but I'm not sure you would want to drive this every day in traffic, you know. So that's just kind of...
This sucker's shaking.
Yeah, it sounds great, and it sounds mean.
This thing's got like aftermarket cams or something? Or?
Yeah, it does have a really big camshaft in it. Probably too big for the 340, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's probably why the power's not that great. It sounds good, it sounds mean, like it's gonna just eat your lunch, but I think it's not quite as advertised. You can smell a lot of raw fuel coming into the cabin.
Woo! We're having a good old time.
It's rich, you know. And as I can lean on it, I'll get into the throttle. You can hear some popping, some detonation. It's not. It's just not optimized, you know. Just a little bit of exhaust leak, some just little quirks that it's not bad. I mean, it's kind of like old car stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're fine with that and you just really enjoy the nostalgia of it, that's awesome. You know, go for it. Be you. But when we're talking about drivability and just enjoyment, there's just nothing that can really be beat with the new Hemi.
Yeah.
So here we are. We have some surge. I think it's almost like it wants to pull through the brakes. Very common with a high-profile camshaft and not enough torque converter to back it up.
It's like, let me show them the mirror. This is, can y'all see it shaking? The whole car is just rumbling, man.
Yeah. Again, it sounds like it's going to tear you up.
But does it have the power to meet its sound?
I'm just hearing a lot of exhaust crack from the top. I don't think it's optimized right now. It's I don't feel comfortable getting on it. Just because, you know, if you don't have the timing set properly and you don't have right function of the carburetor where it's actually the right air-fuel ratio, it's actually injecting fuel right or mixing fuel through the magnetization. But it's not right. You know, I mean, I don't want to sling a piss out the side of this thing.
Yeah.
You know? Woo! It's rich.
It's rich,
like
guys.
Rich. Yeah. Right, it's
old school hot rod.
Old school hot rod. We're just going to make it. We're going to tame it with street manners.
Yeah.
But then we're also going to give it a lot more horsepower and reliability.
Woo! That's what we do, guys.
Let's get a little walk around this.
Let's walk around.
Okay, so we went ahead, did everything from the top side, disconnecting heater hoses, AC hoses, bracketry, electronics, everything attached from the car to the engine, and we lifted the car up and began to work underneath the car. So we'll come along and kind of explain what we did. First thing we did was we went ahead and loosened up the front of suspension by adjusting the torsion keys, loosening them up, relieving the load on the suspension and torsion bars, disconnected the lower ball joint from the spindles so that we could really get some good travel and actually separate the body from the front suspension, the K-member here. In doing so, we also took the calipers, the brake calipers, as you can see, and suspended them from the body, so all of the brake and hardware, that stuff we didn't disconnect or maybe get air into the system, that's all staying intact. Okay. Torsion bars were loosened and slid out of place, so the torsion bars are actually pushed back, and now we're in a position where all we have to do is take the roll pin out of the steering coupling and undo the 4 K-member bolts and the 4 bolts on the transmission cross member, and we'll be able to drop this thing to the ground. Now, why do we do it this way? Well, it's very simple. Is when you put the engine in from the bottom of the car and remove from the bottom of the car, you're in much more control and you're much less likely to damage anything cosmetically. Scratches, nicks, chips, all that stuff. It's going to be much nicer, much easier. Another thing is, with the engine and transmission down here on the ground, we're going to be able to bolt on our long tube headers, our starter, put on the torque converter adapter, the flex plate adapter, and all of these things with ample room to walk around and work around and make sure it's exactly how we want it without leaning over the fenders and potentially harming the car. That's what we want to do. Another reason we're going to do it this way is with the engine out of the way, and this in my face, what we can do is make sure we have proper fuel line routing. The engine and everything will be out of the compartment. You can see the standard fuel lines run right here kind of tightly inside the engine compartment between the headers and the subframe here. So with the engine and everything down on the ground, we're actually going to be able to work with this much better. And it's going to make for a much easier, quicker time in the long run.
Okay, so which are you said 4 in the front?
Yep, so you have 4 in the front. Here, the forward K-member bolt, the rear K-member bolt. Now your strut bar, your sway bar, your lower control arms, all of that stuff is attached to the front K-member. So when we remove these 2 bolts, this will come down together. You did have a lower radiator brace bracket that had to come off and moved at the side. So that's not a problem. Okay. Over here is where the steering coupling is, Mike. If you could come look right here. This is the coupling from the steering column down to right here. You have a roll pin. You push that roll pin out and slide this coupling up, and that'll come off.
Nice.
Okay. I just dropped.
Yeah, some brake pads. And then in the back, you said you got 4. What is it?
Yeah, there's 4 bolts. We already have 2 out.
Yep.
Okay. We did that on purpose just because it would be easier right now. We have these outer ones loosened. So when we get down on the ground, we'll put some, creating some wood blocks underneath all of this. We'll go ahead and pull the rear mounts out while it's down on the ground. We'll do the forward 2 on each side and literally hit the button and lift the car up off of the engine assembly.
Gotcha. Awesome.
I'll go
Almost
slow,
there.
making sure there's no wires or anything that may like snag or anything like that.
Yep.
Really, it's just the easiest way to do it without suspending a 500-pound engine over the front of the nice paintwork.
Yep.
Yeah, we did notice a couple of, little quirky things here and there as an old car. The transmission mount bolts had backed out and they were actually missing. So when we did a test drive, the transmission was kind of bouncing around. That explains why we had some vibration and some bumps, some clumps. The trans bolts
That's
were
scary.
missing, and the rear sway bar was disconnected on one
These
end. So on
bolts,
this end,
they go right
the bushings came out.
there.
Over here, Mike, I'll show you. On this end, we've seen the bushings came out, so the sway bar is actually disconnected from the perch. And on this side, the driver's side, the bushing had deteriorated and it was just completely gone. You can see there's no material here, and it was old, some sort of like a poly mount that had just dried and cracked over the years, you can see.
Yeah.
So we're going to replace the sway bar end links and give it some of that rigidity back again.
Look at this one. Yeah, that's what Blake was talking about. That thing's completely gone.
That's it.
Scary.
We'll be removing this tank. So this fuel tank we're going to reuse because it's in fairly good shape. We'll remove the rear valance, get to the tank strap bolts, the J bolts that hold the tank up with these straps, and we'll be reconditioning this. What I mean by that is removing it, cleaning it out, cutting a hole and installing the Aeromotive fuel system, rinsing it out again, making sure we have no fuel shavings or any type of metal shavings from trimming it out, and then reinstalling it.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process. I really like it. In my car, I have the Tanks Inc. fuel tank, which is it's the same thing as the one you would buy from Summit Racing or Holly. Pros and cons. Pros is the Tanks Inc. tank is very direct, very bolt-in. I mean, it's a very complete kit. I enjoy it. It has an internal baffle, and it comes with like this. It's almost like a ceramic coating. It's very nice, very clean. It's resistant to corrosion, which is good, but it's very loud. So in my car, when you drive it, you can hear the fuel pump. And you know, I went through 2 fuel pumps trying to see if it would make a difference, but really what it is there's no insulation, there's no sound deadening going on. With the way we're doing this fuel tank, with the Aeromotive Phantom fuel system, having that foam NASCAR style baffle around the fuel pump assembly, it's going to be much quieter, and it's going to have just better, you know, street manners, less resonance inside the car. I think it'll be more of a pleasure to drive.
Awesome.
So that's where we are. We'll go ahead and get this thing on the ground and get the 340 off so we can get the Hemi in.
Let's get to it.